The Queen's Declaration. Commander James Carter woke up with a sharp pain in his head. His body felt heavy, his arms stiff. When he tried to move, cold metal cuffs bit into his wrists. His vision was blurry, but he could see a dark room lit by an eerie blue glow. Strange symbols carved into the walls pulsed with an energy he didn't understand. Then he heard footsteps. A tall figure moved toward him, her shadow stretching long across the floor. As his vision cleared, James saw her. She was not human. The alien queen stood before him. Taller than any human woman, her silver eyes glowing in the dim light, her deep blue skin shimmered, and a crown of black, spiked bone curved backward from her head. She wore armor that looked like liquid metal, shifting as she moved. James pulled at his restraints. Where was he? The last thing he remembered was fighting in space, his ship surrounded by enemy vessels. Then, darkness. The Queen's lips curved into a small smile, like she enjoyed his struggle. Then, in a voice both smooth and powerful, she spoke. "You belong to me now, human." James froze. He narrowed his eyes, trying to keep his fear hidden. Captured. A prisoner of war. But this didn't feel like a normal capture. The room wasn't a cell, and she wasn't treating him like a common soldier. "What do you want from me?" James growled, his voice hoarse. The Queen stepped closer, too close. He could feel a strange heat radiating from her. "You will understand soon," she said. Then she raised one hand. James felt a burning sensation on his forehead. He clenched his jaw, refusing to scream. A mark appeared, a glowing alien symbol. His breath came fast. He didn't know what she had just done, but he felt it deep in his bones. Something had changed. The Queen's silver eyes studied him, testing him, measuring him. "You are stronger than I expected," she murmured. James forced himself to stay calm. "You should kill me now," he said, "because if you don't, I promise I'll make you regret it." Instead of anger, the Queen's expression softened. Amusement, respect, something else. She tilted her head. "Kill you," she repeated. Then she smiled, showing sharp white teeth. "No, James Carter. Killing you would be a waste. You are more important than you realize." James felt a chill. How did she know his name? She turned, walking away. Before she left the chamber, she said one last thing. "Rest, human. You will need your strength. Tomorrow, your true purpose begins." The door behind her sealed shut, leaving James alone. A memory of battle. James sat still, staring at the walls, his mind racing. What did she mean? He closed his eyes and tried to remember. The battle. His ship, the Valkyrie, had been on patrol near Korthus, a red moon at the edge of human-controlled space. They had received a distress signal, a human transport ship under attack. James had ordered his crew to intercept, thinking it was a standard pirate raid. But when they arrived, it was a trap. A fleet of Cenarian warships had waited in the shadows, hundreds of them. Far more than anyone thought the Cenarian Empire still had. The fight had been brutal. Explosions, warnings, screams over the comms. James had fought until the very last second, until his ship was torn apart by energy blasts. Then, darkness. Now he was here. Why? The prison without bars. Hours passed, maybe days. The room was not a cell. But it wasn't freedom either. There were no bars, no chains except for the cuffs on his wrists, but the walls seemed alive. When he touched them, they pulsed under his fingers. He had tried to force the door open. It didn't even budge. Then the whispers began. Not from the walls, not from speakers, from inside his own head. Words he didn't understand, echoes of a language he had never heard before, yet somehow recognized. James gritted his teeth, pressing his hands to his skull. Was he going mad? Or had the Queen done something to him? A deadly warning. The door slid open, and a strange figure stepped inside. Not the Queen. A Xenarian warrior. His armor was black, his yellow eyes sharp. He stood tall, radiating pure hostility. James tensed, preparing for a fight. The warrior did not attack. Instead, he leaned in close and whispered, his voice low and urgent. "Do not trust the queen." James's blood ran cold. "Why?" he asked. But before the warrior could answer, a force yanked him backward. The queen's voice echoed from the hallway, smooth and unbothered. "That is enough." The warrior was dragged away by invisible energy, his body thrashing against an unseen force. James was left alone again. But this time, his heart pounded with a new realization. Something was very wrong. He was not just a prisoner. He was part of something much bigger. And if the queen had her way, he would never be the same again. The queen's game. James woke to the sensation of warmth against his skin, a stark contrast to the cold metallic cuffs that had bound him before. He was no longer in the dark throne room. Instead, he found himself in a chamber unlike anything he had seen before. The walls pulsed softly, glowing with deep blue veins of energy, as if the entire room was alive. A large, circular window stretched across one side, revealing an ocean of stars beyond. He sat up quickly, his body still aching from whatever the queen had done to him. His fingers instinctively reached for his forehead, where the alien sigil still burned faintly. It wasn't just a mark. He could feel it, like something was inside him now, humming in sync with his heartbeat. He clenched his fist. He needed answers. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, and the queen entered, moving like flowing water. She was dressed in the same shimmering armor, her silver eyes reflecting the soft light of the chamber. She didn't speak at first, only studying him, as if waiting for something. James met her gaze, refusing to show fear. "You slept longer than expected," she finally said. "Good. Your body is adjusting." "Adjusting to what?" James shot back, his voice sharper than he intended. The queen tilted her head, as though amused by his defiance. "To your place in the grand design." James clenched his jaw. He had no patience for riddles. "I don't belong to you." A small smile touched her lips. "That is what all of them say at first." Her words sent a chill through him. All of them? He wasn't the first. His mind raced with possibilities, but before he could press for more, the queen lifted her hand. The air around them shimmered, and suddenly, the walls of the chamber changed. The stars outside the window vanished, replaced by a vast battlefield. James staggered back, his pulse spiking as he recognized the scene. It was Earth, or at least what was left of it. Cities burned. The sky was thick with smoke. The remains of human warships lay scattered like fallen beasts, their wreckage littering the scorched ground. Alien ships hovered overhead, firing energy beams into the rubble below. It was a vision of extinction. James's breath caught in his throat. What is this?" "The future," the queen said simply. James turned to her, his hands tightening into fists. "You're lying. This hasn't happened." The queen stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Not yet, but it will. Your kind is strong, but you are reckless. You fight without understanding the greater forces at play. The war you think you are winning is already lost." James forced himself to look away from the burning vision before him. He wouldn't let her plant fear in his mind. "And you expect me to believe that you're here to save us?" He let out a humorless laugh. "Your fleet wiped out my ship. You captured me. Forgive me if I don't see you as a savior." The queen's gaze darkened. "Your ship was not meant to be destroyed. You were meant to be brought to me." James's stomach twisted. Every instinct in him screamed that she was manipulating him. He had been in war long enough to know that information was just as much a weapon as any blade or rifle. But there was something else, something deeper, that made his skin crawl. "Why me?" he asked, his voice quieter now. The queen didn't answer immediately. She lifted her hand again, and the burning vision of Earth shifted. Now, James saw something else. a history hidden in time. The scene showed humans and Cenarians, side by side, not as enemies, but allies. The images flickered like memories, human warriors fighting alongside alien soldiers, sharing technology, standing together against a common foe. It made no sense. James shook his head. That's impossible. We've been fighting you for decades. The Queen's silver eyes softened, and for the first time, she looked almost weary. You were not always our enemy. James stared at the images, his mind struggling to make sense of it all. Was this another trick? A way to confuse him? But something inside him, something deep, something connected to the mark on his forehead, whispered that she wasn't lying. If that's true, James said slowly, then why are we fighting now? The Queen's gaze flickered with something unreadable. Because you have forgotten, she said softly. And those who wish to control you have made sure you never remember. James's breath slowed. Control us? His fingers twitched. He wasn't sure if it was out of anger or realization. Before he could demand more answers, the chamber's door slid open again. A figure stepped inside. A Cenarian warrior, armored in black. His yellow eyes flickered toward the Queen before settling on James. His face was stern, unreadable. The elders have called for him, the warrior said. His voice was sharp, filled with authority. The Queen exhaled slowly, then turned to James. They fear you, she said simply. James frowned. Why? The warrior answered instead. Because you are not a prisoner, human. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, as though revealing a deadly secret. You are a weapon. James felt the weight of those words settle in his chest like a stone. He wasn't sure if it was fear or something else stirring inside him. Before he could ask anything more, the Queen moved to the door, gesturing for him to follow. Come, James Carter, she said. It is time you see what they fear. James hesitated for only a moment. Then, steeling himself, he stepped forward into the unknown. The hunter becomes the hunted. James walked in silence, his boots echoing against the cold metal floor. Two Cenarian warriors flanked him, their towering forms moving with practiced precision. The Queen led the way, her posture regal and unwavering. Her silver eyes remained fixed ahead, but James could feel her attention on him, like a predator watching its prey. The corridors of the alien vessel were vast and strangely organic. The walls pulsed faintly, illuminated by flowing veins of energy, as if the ship itself was alive. James wasn't sure what unsettled him more, the eerie glow or the whispers that had not left his mind since he awoke. The alien sigil on his forehead tingled, sending ripples of warmth down his spine. He tried to ignore it, but something had changed within him. He could feel the ship, as if it recognized him. The Queen finally stopped before a massive door, taller than any human structure he had ever seen. With a simple flick of her wrist, the entrance peeled open like a living thing responding to her command. Beyond it, the room expanded into an immense chamber, but this was no throne room. James's breath hitched. Cells, rows of them. Some were filled with creatures he had never seen before, warriors from other worlds, their eyes hollow, their bodies scared. But what made his stomach turn were the humans. At least a dozen of them, some slumped against the walls, others lying motionless on the cold floors. Their clothing was tattered, their faces sunken. Some looked up as he entered, their gazes empty, defeated. James clenched his fists. Captured soldiers, prisoners of war. He had been prepared for many things, but not this. A man in the nearest cell stirred. His beard was thick, his face marked by age and battle. His eyes sharpened the moment they landed on James. He pushed himself up with a groan, gripping the bars. You, the man breathed, as if seeing a ghost. James frowned. He didn't recognize him. Do I know you? The man let out a dry, humorless chuckle. Not yet, but we've been waiting for you. James took a step closer, his pulse quickening. Waiting for me. The Queen's voice cut through the air. He speaks the truth. James turned to her, rage boiling under his skin. Then explain. Why are there humans in your cells? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to a nearby console, brushing her fingers over its surface. The walls responded, shifting and revealing symbols that James somehow understood. These humans were not taken as prisoners, she said calmly. They were chosen. James felt a chill creep up his spine. Chosen for what? The man in the cell answered first. To become something else, he said, his voice laced with bitterness. To be reshaped. Used. James turned back to the Queen, his muscles tense. Is that what you're planning for me? The Queen held his gaze, unreadable as always. You are different, she said. More than them. More than you realize. James stepped back. Lies. Manipulation. He had spent his life fighting enemies who played with words as much as they played with weapons. But this was different. There was something deeper here, something clawing at his mind. He could feel the truth pressing against his thoughts, waiting for him to see it. Then, the pain hit. James dropped to one knee, his vision blurring. A flood of images, flashes of memories that weren't his, faces, battles, entire lifetimes, unfolding in seconds. He gasped, gripping his head as the whispers grew louder. The Queen knelt beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. You are waking up. James gritted his teeth, forcing the visions away. He fought against the storm in his mind, breathing heavily as the pain receded. His eyes burned as he looked up at her. What did you do to me? The Queen didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the man in the cell. You were one of the first, she said. You understand what he is becoming. The man stared at her with pure hatred. I understand that you play God, that you twist and break people for your war. He turned back to James, his expression softer but grim. Listen to me, son. Whatever she's done to you, it's not a gift. It's a chain. James's heart pounded. The words rang too true. The warmth in his forehead, the whispers, the strange understanding of an alien language. It all felt too much like control. The Queen rose to her full height, her patience unshaken. He is not like you, she told the prisoner. He is something more. Before James could speak, a sudden explosion shook the ship. The walls trembled, alarms blaring in a deep guttural tone. The Exenarian warriors in the room immediately moved into formation, their hands on their weapons. The Queen's expression darkened. They are here. James forced himself up, his body still tingling from the visions. Who? The prisoner in the cell let out a bitter laugh. The ones who really run this war. He glanced at James. And trust me, kid, they aren't here to save you. James turned toward the Queen, his instincts screaming. What's happening? The Queen's eyes burned with something James had not seen before. Fear. The elders, she said. They have come to erase you. James's breath caught in his throat. Erase. The walls shook again, and in the distance, a deep, unnatural voice echoed through the halls. A voice that did not belong to any Xenarian James had heard before. You should not exist. The lights flickered. The ship groaned. James clenched his fists. The hunter was now the hunted. The Queen's secret. The ship trembled beneath James's feet. The alarms had shifted from a steady warning to a sharp, urgent wail. Something was coming. The Exenarian warriors in the chamber moved swiftly, their bodies tensed, their weapons humming with latent energy. Even the Queen, for the first time since James had met her, looked uneasy. James barely had time to process her last words. Erase. It was not just an attack. Whoever was coming wasn't here to capture or destroy. They wanted to remove him from existence. His instincts screamed at him to act. The humans in the cells. He couldn't leave them behind. He turned toward the Queen, his mind racing. Open the cells, he demanded. She didn't move. James's pulse hammered. Now. The Queen's gaze was unreadable, but her fingers brushed over the panel beside her. The cells slid open, releasing their captives. Some of the prisoners staggered, weak from confinement, while others, seasoned soldiers, immediately fell into defensive stances, their instincts sharper than their bodies. The older prisoner, the one who had warned James, stepped forward. His lips twisted into something between a smirk and a grimace. "Not sure if I trust you yet, kid," he muttered. "But I'll take my chances with you over whatever's knocking on the door." Another explosion rocked the ship. This time, the lights flickered, and the walls groaned as if the entire vessel were alive and in pain. Then the air changed, thickened, as if something unseen had seeped into it. And then James heard it. A voice. It didn't come from the comms. It didn't echo through the halls like a transmission. It resonated inside his own mind, vibrating through his skull like an unbearable weight pressing against his thoughts. "You are in error. You should not exist." James gasped, gripping the sides of his head. His vision blurred, not with pain, but with something else. A feeling of being pulled apart, of something reaching deep inside him, trying to unravel him from the inside out. He wasn't the only one. The other prisoners staggered, clutching their heads, their faces contorted with agony. Some collapsed entirely, their bodies limp, as if their very existence had been switched off. James fought against the force, his breath coming in sharp gasps. What the hell is that?" The Queen was at his side, gripping his shoulder. He could barely register the strange warmth of her touch before she spoke. "The elders." James looked up at her, his vision still swimming. "What are they?" Her silver eyes met his, and for the first time, James saw something close to regret in them. "They are what remains of the ones who created my people," she said softly. "The true rulers of the Xenarian Empire." Another explosion, closer this time. The walls warped, as if reality itself were bending. The Queen gripped James's arm, pulling him forward. "We have to move. Now." James shook off the dizziness, forcing himself to follow. The prisoners moved too, some dragging the weaker ones, others moving with the battle-hardened efficiency of soldiers who had spent too much time in wars that weren't theirs. The halls twisted and pulsed around them as they ran. The ship itself was struggling against whatever force was invading it. The Queen led them through winding corridors, down into the heart of the vessel, deeper and deeper, until they reached a chamber unlike the rest. James skidded to a stop as he took in the sight before him. It was a vault, a massive glowing structure embedded into the ship's core. The energy radiating from it was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls around it pulsed with an eerie golden glow. The Queen moved toward it, pressing her hand against the shimmering surface. A hidden panel slid open, revealing what looked like a control interface. James felt his heartbeat slow. "What is this?" The Queen didn't turn around. The truth. The vault hissed as it unlocked. The walls peeled away like layers of liquid metal, revealing a figure suspended in energy. James's breath caught. It was a human. No, not just a human. James took a step closer, his chest tightening as he stared at the floating figure. It was him. Suspended inside the glowing field was a version of himself, identical, yet different. This James looked older, stronger. His skin was marked with glowing patterns, the same alien sigil that burned on James's forehead. He turned toward the Queen, his voice barely a whisper. "What the hell is this?" She exhaled, and when she spoke, her voice was almost soft. "You are not the first," she said. "You are the last." James's world tilted. The Queen placed a hand on the glowing field, and suddenly, memories that were not his flooded his mind. Wars fought in the shadows of dying stars, human and Xenarian side by side. A bond that had once been unbreakable, until it was erased. James staggered back. This isn't possible." The Queen's eyes held something that almost resembled sadness. "The elders will not allow you to remember." The ship lurched again. From the corridor behind them, the air rippled, twisted. Then the elders stepped through. They were not like the Xenarian. They were tall, impossibly thin, their bodies covered in dark, shifting patterns that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Their faces had no features, just smooth, void-like masks where eyes and mouths should be. One of them raised a hand. James felt himself unraveling again. His vision blurred, his body felt light, as if he was being pulled apart, piece by piece, from the inside out. The Queen moved between them, her voice ringing out like a blade of sound. "No, he is the last." The elders did not stop. They reached for him. James's vision flickered. The vault pulsed behind him. The whispers in his mind turned into a scream. And then something snapped. A surge of raw energy exploded from James's body, shattering the air, forcing the elders back. The golden vault flared, the energy inside it merging with him, searing through every nerve in his body. James gasped as everything shifted. The whispers were gone. The pain was gone. Instead, he felt power. His eyes snapped open, glowing the same eerie gold as the sigil on his forehead. The Queen took a slow step back. "It's beginning," she whispered. James turned toward the elders, his fists clenched. The ship trembled, not in fear, but in response to him. For the first time, the elders hesitated. James smirked. "Not so easy to erase now, am I?" The uprising begins. The silence that followed James's transformation was heavy, charged with an energy that seemed to warp the very air around him. His hands trembled as he looked at them, not with fear, but with raw, unfamiliar power. The sigil on his forehead pulsed, not just with heat but with something deeper, something alive. For the first time, the whispers in his head were silent. The presence that had haunted him since his capture was no longer a foreign invader. It was him. Across the chamber, the elders stood motionless, their featureless faces unreadable. For beings who had spent centuries ruling from the shadows, they had never anticipated this moment. They had controlled, erased, and rewritten history time and time again to ensure that he would never happen. James flexed his fingers, feeling the energy coil inside him like a caged beast. He took a step forward, the floor beneath him humming in response. The elders did not retreat, but he could feel it. Uncertainty. For the first time, in whom knew how long, they were afraid. He grinned. "Looks like I broke your little game." The Queen stepped beside him, her silver eyes flickering with something unreadable. "James," she said carefully, "you must control it." James exhaled slowly, his body still vibrating with power. "I've spent my whole life in control." He looked at the elders. Now it's their turn to lose it. The moment those words left his lips, the elders moved. Not with weapons, not with sound. They folded reality itself. The walls of the ship twisted into impossible shapes, stretching and breaking like liquid metal. The air became dense, suffocating, as if gravity had been turned against him. The elders reached out, not with hands, but with sheer force, grabbing at his very existence. James felt himself unraveling. It was like being erased at the edges, like his body was being rewritten into nothingness. But this time, he fought back. He didn't resist their pull. He pushed into it. Instead of letting them tear him apart, he reached into the same force, into the strange golden energy now thrumming inside him. He didn't just exist in their reality anymore. He bent it. With a roar, James threw his hands outward, sending a shockwave of raw force that blasted through the chamber. The elders staggered, not far, not much, but it was enough. The very idea that they could be touched, that they could be pushed back, sent something through them that James could only describe as terror. The prisoners, who had remained frozen in the chaos, saw it too. One of them, the older man who had warned James before, let out a sharp laugh. "Well, I'll be damned." His eyes met James's, a spark of something long buried rekindling. "That's our sign, boys." James barely had time to process what was happening before the entire chamber exploded into motion. The freed prisoners, long assumed broken, rose as warriors. Some of them snatched weapons from fallen guards. Others used their bare hands. It was a frenzy, a storm of fists and gunfire, of alien steel meeting flesh, of cries that were not of pain, but of long-suppressed vengeance. The elders did not react with panic. They never panicked. Instead, they moved with the cold precision of beings who had always been untouchable. One of them raised its hand, not at James, but at the prisoners. James felt it before it happened. The pull, the unraveling. No. With a snarl, he moved faster than thought. 1 second, he was standing among his people. The next, he was in front of the elder, grabbing its wrist. The elder froze. James's grip was not just physical. It was something else, something deeper. He wasn't just holding the elder, he was pulling it into his reality. For the first time, the void-like figure twitched, a reaction, a fear. James leaned in, his voice quiet but sharp as a blade. Your turn. And then he crushed the elder's wrist. A sound rang out, not a scream, but something that had never been heard before in this universe, a sound of a god bleeding. The other elders reacted instantly. They lunged, not at him, but at the queen. James barely had time to shout before she lifted her hand, stopping them with a force of her own. For all her cold, calculated control, James saw something rare in her eyes. Strain. She was powerful, yes, but even she could not hold them forever. James understood what had to be done. He turned to the prisoners. Get to the escape pods. Now. The older soldier snarled. And leave you here. James turned back to the elders, who were already recovering. His grip on reality was getting stronger, but he still had no idea what his limits were. I'll hold them off. The queen's gaze snapped to him. You will not survive. James smirked. Then they should be afraid. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But then she gave a sharp nod. She trusted him. The prisoners fled, their shouts echoing down the corridors as they fought their way to freedom. The ship continued to fracture, bend, shift. The elders regrouped, their forms twisting as they prepared to strike again. James rolled his shoulders, power burning beneath his skin. He had been running his whole life, fighting wars where he was just another soldier, another number, another man following orders. But this was his war now. The elders raised their hands. James raised his fists. And then, the real battle began. The war for humanity. The air in the chamber crackled with raw energy. The elders stood in a loose formation, their featureless faces turned toward James, their bodies shifting like shadows caught between dimensions. They did not move like normal beings. They didn't breathe, didn't show anger or fear. Except now, there was something different. They hesitated. James felt it. A ripple in the air, a fracture in their absolute control. The moment he had crushed one of their own, something had changed. For the first time, they were uncertain. The queen remained at his side, her body tense, her silver eyes scanning the elders with calculating precision. Even she, powerful as she was, knew what they were up against. The elders had ruled for centuries, unseen, untouchable. They were not meant to be challenged. Yet, here they stood, James Carter, human, standing against the gods of an empire. The ship trembled as another explosion rocked its core. In the distance, alarms howled through the corridors. The escape pods were launching. The prisoners were getting away. That, at least, was a victory. But James knew he wouldn't be leaving. Not yet. One of the elders finally spoke, its voice a distortion that rattled inside his skull. You are an anomaly. A mistake. We will correct you. James exhaled sharply. The power inside him hummed, responding to his rising defiance. You've been correcting history for too long. His eyes narrowed. But I'm still here. And you don't know why. A pause, a flicker of hesitation. That was all he needed. James lunged. He moved faster than he ever had before, his body a blur of motion. He didn't need to think. His instincts, his power, whatever the queen had awakened in him, took over. His fist connected with the nearest elder's chest. Reality fractured. The impact didn't just break the elder. It rippled outward, tearing through space itself. The elder's body twisted, its form shuddering as its existence began to collapse in on itself. It let out a sound like a dying universe before disintegrating into nothing. James landed, breathing hard, his entire body burning with energy. He had just erased an elder from reality. The remaining 3 elders reeled back, their forms flickering in and out like glitching images. For the first time, James saw something that looked very much like fear. The queen stepped forward, her voice smooth, unshaken. "You did not anticipate this, did you?" One of the elders lurched forward, its form stretching like liquid shadow. "You do not understand what you have done." James clenched his fists. "Then explain it to me." The elder's voice turned into a whisper barely audible, yet it pressed into his mind like a weight. "You were never meant to be." The words struck something deep within him, something ancient. He felt a rush of memories that were not his own. 1,000 lives, 1,000 versions of himself. Some who had fought, some who had been erased before they ever realized what they were. The elders had been removing him from history over and over again. And yet, somehow, he had returned. James took a step back, his heart pounding. "How many times have you tried to erase me?" The elders didn't answer. That silence was enough. The queen spoke instead, her voice low. "They do not create. They only erase. That is their purpose." James's breath came faster. He had spent his whole life believing he was just another soldier in a war that never seemed to end. But that wasn't true, was it? He had never been just another soldier. He had always been the target. A shudder ran through the ship. Something was coming. The elders straightened, their bodies going rigid. For the first time, they were not the ones in control. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the ship's intercom, cutting through the alarms and the chaos. Planet Killer Prime armed and ready. James's blood ran cold. The elders turned to him in unison. "We will wipe your world clean." Everything inside him ignited. James moved without thinking, his body fueled by instinct, by rage, by the sheer refusal to let humanity be erased. His hands clenched into fists, the golden energy around him surging as he launched himself at the elders. But this time, they were ready. The moment he lunged, they shifted reality. The walls around him disappeared, the floor beneath him vanished, and suddenly, James was falling. No, being pulled through space itself. His mind screamed as he was ripped through dimensions, flung across time, across worlds. And then, he landed. Hard. The ground beneath him was cold. He gasped, his lungs burning, his body reeling from the sheer force of being thrown across space. He staggered to his feet, blinking against the harsh glare of artificial lights. James's breath caught in his throat. He was standing on a human battleship. His battleship. The Valkyrie. Except, it wasn't destroyed. It was intact, and the battle had not yet begun. James turned, his stomach twisting as he saw his own crew moving around him, preparing for a fight they didn't realize was a trap. He had been sent back. The elders had rewritten time again. But this time, they had sent him back to the moment before it all started. A comms officer turned to him. "Commander Carter, orders." James staggered back. He was back on the day of the ambush. Back before he had been captured. Before he had met the Queen. Before he had awakened. His mind spun. He had a choice now. He could let events play out again. Let himself be captured. Let the cycle repeat. Or, James clenched his fists. No, not this time. The Valkyrie was about to be ambushed. But now he knew what was coming. For the first time, James Carter was ahead of the game. And this time, he was going to win. The final stand. James stood frozen on the bridge of the Valkyrie, his mind racing. Everything around him was exactly as he remembered it. The hum of the ship's engines, the distant chatter of his crew, the blinking red light on the tactical display showing an incoming distress signal, the same signal that had led them into the ambush. Except this time, James wasn't just a soldier following orders. He knew the future. He exhaled sharply, forcing his pulse to slow. He had been thrown back in time, a final desperate move by the elders to erase him, but they had made a mistake. They had given him a second chance. A comms officer turned toward him, her expression expectant. "Commander, the distress call. Orders." James's hands curled into fists. His instincts screamed at him to warn them, to tell them what was coming, but he knew better than to panic his crew. He had seconds to make the right call. One wrong move, and history would repeat itself. "Disregard the distress signal," he said firmly. Silence rippled through the bridge. The crew exchanged glances. "Sir," the officer asked, hesitant. "It's a civilian transport." James's jaw clenched. It wasn't. He knew that now. "It's a trap," he said, stepping forward, his voice commanding. "Divert all power to shields. Activate stealth systems, and get me a firing solution on the closest possible enemy position." His second in command, Lieutenant Graves, frowned but didn't argue. "You think we're walking into an ambush?" James met his gaze. "I don't think. I know." There was a brief moment of hesitation, then Graves nodded. "Aye, sir." The Valkyrie shifted course. Instead of heading blindly toward the false distress beacon, they cut power to non-essential systems, activating their stealth plating. The bridge darkened slightly, the ship becoming a ghost in the vastness of space. James turned toward the main viewport, watching as the stars stretched ahead. Any second now. There. Space rippled. The Exenarian fleet emerged from behind Korthus, right where they had been waiting the first time. Hundreds of enemy ships, their weapons already primed for an easy kill. But this time, the Valkyrie was ready. James didn't hesitate. "Fire all forward cannons. Full spread." A heartbeat later, the ship lit up. Torpedoes and energy blasts streaked across the void, catching the Exenarian fleet off guard. Instead of an ambush, the ambushers had become the hunted. The enemy's front line erupted into flames, ships breaking apart before they could even fire their first shots. James felt the rush of pure strategic satisfaction. He had broken the loop. But then, something else happened. The void shimmered. Not an explosion. Not a ship. Something else. A rift. And from it, they arrived. The elders. James's heart pounded as their dark forms materialized. Not on ships, not as pilots or warriors, but as something outside of time and space itself. They stepped into reality as if tearing through existence like a thin veil, their bodies pulsing with a power James could barely comprehend. The crew froze. The weapons fire ceased. Even the Exenarian fleet hesitated. James gritted his teeth. "All ships, focus fire on the rift." The Valkyrie and the surrounding human fleet unleashed hell. Beams of light and ballistic rounds collided with the rift, but it was like throwing stones at a black hole. The elders were beyond physics, beyond anything that could be destroyed with mere weapons. And they were coming for him. James felt their presence invading his mind again, trying to unmake him, trying to erase him from history once more. But this time, he pushed back. The sigil on his forehead blazed, and for the first time, he reached into their realm. It was like plunging into an ocean of infinite weight, but instead of drowning, he seized control. The whispers in his mind were no longer commands. They were his to command. The elders recoiled, their forms shuddering. James stepped forward and reached out. Reality buckled. The rift collapsed in on itself, pulling the elders inward, their distorted figures twisting and stretching. They struggled. They resisted. But James held firm. For centuries, they had erased him. Now, it was his turn. With a final, focused burst of energy, he crushed them. The elders screamed, not in sound, but in raw, fractured existence. They folded inward, collapsing into the very void they had controlled for so long. And then, silence. The battlefield was still. The rift was gone. The elders were gone. James exhaled, his body shaking, his vision flickering between reality and something far beyond it. He had done it. He had ended them. But the war wasn't over. The Xenarian fleet still remained. And the Queen, where was she? A new transmission flashed onto the main screen. A single Xenarian warship, larger than the rest, was broadcasting directly to the Valkyrie. James stepped forward, his breath steady. He already knew who it was. The screen flickered, and the Queen's silver eyes met his. She was smiling. Not in mockery, not in amusement, but in something almost respectful. "You have done what none before you could," she said. "The elders are no more." James folded his arms. "And now what? Your empire falls." The Queen tilted her head slightly. "Perhaps, or perhaps it changes." James narrowed his eyes. "You knew, didn't you, that this was how it had to end?" She exhaled slowly. "I did. But knowing and ensuring it comes to pass are two very different things." The tension in the air shifted. The Xenarian ships, once poised for war, held their positions, not out of weakness, but out of uncertainty. Their gods were gone. James had become something new, a force even they did not fully understand. The Queen's voice softened. "This war has no winner, James Carter, only the choice of what comes next." James considered that for a long moment. He had spent his whole life fighting, believing there was only victory or defeat. But now he had rewritten the future itself. He glanced at his crew, his people, his home. Then, finally, he turned back to the Queen. And he made his choice. The war ended that day, not with fire, not with surrender, but with something greater. A new beginning. Years later, when historians try to explain the impossible moment when the universe itself shifted, when the war between humans and Xenarians simply stopped, they never found a definitive answer. They only knew one thing. James Carter was at its center. A man who had lived 1,000 lives. A soldier who had become something more. A warrior who had defeated the gods and spared the mortals. His story was whispered across the stars. A legend, a ghost, a warning. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of space, the last of the Xenarian queens still watched. Still waiting. Because the future, after all, was never truly set in stone. It was waiting to be written.